Have you ever really stopped to think about the invisible blueprints that kind of shape our entire world? I mean, we use them for everything, from the way we talk to how we organize our own thoughts, and even how we make sense of something as massive as history. So today, we're going to decode those hidden structures, starting with the smallest bits of language and going all the way up to the grand design of our collective past.
So let's start with the smallest possible blueprint, right? This little piece of code that's embedded in our language, and that's the idiom. It's basically a phrase where the meaning isn't literal at all. If someone tells you to break a leg, they're wishing you good luck. They're not actually hoping you get injured. It's this tiny, shared blueprint for understanding that we all just get.
And this is exactly why it's such a brilliant place to start. The US State Department puts it perfectly. These little linguistic structures, they're not just about words. They are a window into a culture. It's like a blueprint for a shared experience. So the main point here is that even our language, the very foundation of how we communicate, is built on these kinds of plans.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with that code in our language, and then we're going to scale up to blueprints for our own brains. Then, we'll look at how we can give blueprints to machines, see how different blueprints play out in real-world strategies, and finally, we're going to question the biggest blueprint of all, the master plan of history itself.
All right, let's dive right into our first topic, the code hidden inside our language. We're talking about those fundamental building blocks, like idioms, that add all these layers of color and context and culture to the way we talk to each other every single day.
The thing about these building blocks, though, is how complex they can be. I mean, can you imagine if you're not a native speaker and you hear, "It's raining cats and dogs" for the first time? It must be absolutely baffling. But that complexity is exactly what makes them so fascinating. They're a direct link to the collective imagination of a people, basically a whole story packed into just a few words.
So this brings up a really interesting question, right? If our language is so structured, what about the chaotic world inside our own heads? Is there some kind of blueprint we can apply to manage our own thoughts and all the stuff we have to do?
Oh, absolutely. And that brings us to David Allen's Getting Things Done method. Now, this is not just another to-do list. It's a complete blueprint for offloading all that mental clutter, a system designed to give your brain the freedom to do what it actually does best, think and create.
What's so great about this method is how simple the blueprint is when you lay it out. It all kicks off with step 1, collect. You get every single task, every idea, every little worry out of your head and into a trusted system, like a notebook or an app. From there, you go to step 2, process. You just go through that inbox and decide what each thing is and what needs to happen next. Then you organize it all, you review it regularly to keep it current, and then, the most important part, you just do. You learn to trust the blueprint you've built for yourself.
So why go through all this trouble? Well, the payoff is huge. First, you get rid of that nagging anxiety that you're forgetting something important. Second, you see a massive boost in your actual results. You're getting more done. And third, and this is the real game changer, you harness all your mental power for big picture thinking. It's this amazing psychological shift from just remembering stuff to actually doing stuff.
Okay, so we've got a blueprint for language, and now we have a blueprint for our minds. So what's the next logical step? What if we could give a blueprint to a machine, to an AI, and have it automatically generate new, complex, structured ideas for us?
And this is where it gets really, really clever. So take Google's Notebook LM, right? It's an AI tool that was supposed to be English only. But users figured out a hack, a very specific blueprint to make it create these detailed conversational podcasts in other languages, like Spanish.
And this just brilliantly illustrates the trick. To get the AI to make a podcast in Spanish, you couldn't just write the instructions in Spanish. It's kind of paradoxical, but you had to give it a super detailed blueprint in English, and you had to explicitly tell it, create a podcast in Spanish. The audio and language must be generated in Spanish. It's kind of like giving an architect the blueprints in one language so they can build a house in the style of another.
And the lesson here is just incredibly powerful. When you understand the underlying structure of a system, whether that's an AI or really anything else, and you give it the right blueprint, you can make it do things that are way beyond what you thought its limits were. The potential was always there. It just needed the right set of instructions to unlock it.
So let's scale this up one more time. We've seen how the right blueprint can unlock hidden potential in a closed system, like an AI. But what happens when we try to apply different blueprints to the messy, unpredictable system of a real-world problem? How do competing master plans for change actually stack up against each other? Well, this brings us to a fantastic story from the British Council about two friends, Janie and the narrator, and their mission to make their town more green. It's a perfect case study in how a blueprint evolves, showing how strategy has to adapt through a whole lot of trial and error. Just look at this progression. They start with Plan 1, pure rebellion, and it fails. So they escalate with Plan 2, the bamboo forest, and that lands one of them in prison. So that forces them to completely change their blueprint for Plan 3. They try working within the system with a business plan, but the system just rejects it. And then comes the real breakthrough with Plan 4. They go back to their original idea, but this time with a much smarter blueprint, and they win public support. This all leads to Plan 5, the ultimate evolution of their strategy. If you can't beat the system, the new blueprint is to become the system.
That journey from a simple protest to a full-blown master plan for political change is just incredible. But it raises one final, totally mind-bending question. What if we could apply the same thinking, not to a town's future, but to the entire world's past? What if history's blueprint wasn't actually set in stone?
This is the fascinating world of counterfactual history, and it's explored in this great essay collection called What If? Historians take a single pivotal moment in time, they change the outcome, and then they logically map out how a completely different historical blueprint would have unfolded from there.
I mean, just think about these for a second. What if the Spanish Armada had actually succeeded? Or what if George Washington was captured early in the Revolutionary War? What if D-Day had failed? Each one of these is a single change to the historical blueprint that would have created a world we literally wouldn't even recognize today.
And this is the profound takeaway, really. A review from CNN puts it perfectly. Our entire history, our reality, it hangs on these slender threads. The grand master plan that led us to this exact moment is so much more fragile and random than we often imagine.
So, from the tiny idioms we speak to the productivity systems in our minds, all the way to the grand sweep of history, it's pretty clear we live by blueprints. Which brings us to one final question for you to think about. If our entire world is the result of one particular blueprint playing out over centuries, what's the most important blueprint you're following to build your own life?